George Carlin was a man who spent decades telling Americans to their face how fat and stupid they were, and getting them to laugh at it. And this was back when America had only commenced its descent down the slippery slope of degeneracy. Before TikTok, before third wave fat acceptance, and before the Wendy's pretzel bacon pub triple cheeseburger. George had the dream job for a misanthropic pessimist. Just get on a stage and rant about all the things that you're pissed off about. A lot of us like to rant from time to time, but very few of us are fortunate enough to have thousands of people pay to hear us do it. It's the equivalent of some lonely guy getting paid for his solo time. You've heard of OnlyFans? This is Only Hands. Look, Ma, only hands. Now, there are some comedians who act as distractions. When there's something ugly in society, they serve as grinning and dancing cartoon characters, diverting your attention away from the problem and towards something frivolous. George's comedy, by contrast, dove headfirst into the taboo topics of the day, identifying hypocrisy in search of creative and comical solutions. I totally sound like Jon Stewart right now. Sorry about that. George's daughter was upset about the Dudesy hour-long AI special, and I can't say I blame her. I'd be upset too if someone did an hour-long AI version of my old man. Of course, I'm not sure there's much of an audience for 1 hour of a drunk guy complaining about gas prices, and somehow managing to blame it on the guys in the trendy part of town who wore rainbow-colored shirts. Regardless of the daughter's feelings, did AI put on a quality performance in the hour-long George Carlin comedy special? I, for one, feel like they left some jokes on the table. For example, they joked about the alpha named Chad. But they neglected to mention that the manly country of Chad has the second highest fertility rate in the world, trailing only Niger. I feel like there's a joke there somewhere. The AI special tried to imagine what George would say if he were around today. You notice how there aren't any circuses anymore? That's because the world became the circus, and if Shakespeare was right that the world's a stage and we are merely players, we're not performing Hamlet, people. It's a stage of circus animals turning on their trainers, but instead of attacking them, we attack ourselves and poop on the stage. This AI is a whole new form of joke theft. If the old form of joke thievery was Amy Schumer stealing a Snickers bar from her friend's purse, this modern AI is 1 million Amy Schumers raiding a Hershey's chocolate factory with her tits hanging out. Remember the old joke about why Dennis Leary was famous and Bill Hicks was an unknown? Because there is no cure for cancer. So considering George would almost certainly hate it, why did they make an hour-long version of Carlin's comedy? Because George died of heart failure, and AI has no heart. AI is going to bury us in comedy the way high-speed internet buried young men in pornos. I'm sure you've heard of NoFap. In the same way you build up a tolerance to porn that requires you to consume more graphic content, you will eventually need to watch more and more extreme comedy in order to be entertained. This theory is called the progression thesis. You used to get off on knock-knock jokes and big knockers in lingerie. Then you progress to lipstick lesbians and slapstick thespians. Eventually, you end up in a Thai brothel surrounded by every variety of sexual fetish when some sex tourist named Corn Pop, who is vacationing with his son, comes stumbling down the stairs while carrying a dozen ice cream cones. dumping them on some ladyboy named Coom On Man. And you don't even crack a smile. The only comics who might be immune from AI stealing their jokes are pratfall comedians, comics who say words that an AI program wouldn't dare touch, and morbidly obese comics who sacrifice their health for an audience's entertainment. Both Kramer and Newman are safe. For now. Now, outside of falling over sofas while spewing racial epithets or packing on 250 pounds of cellulite, is there any way to stop the AI comedy bots? I got an idea. Let's send Joe Rogan to threaten them like he did Carlos Mencia. Now that begs a unique question. Why did AI need to steal George Carlin's character? Why not just steal the jokes and give the material to a new comic? Like, let's say, Jorge Carlincia. Hay 7 palabras que no puedes decir. Mierda, orinar, joder, coño, mamahuevo, cabrón, y tetas. In the George Carlin AI special, they joke that dead stand-up comedians will replace newscasters. In the past fiscal year, Customs and Border Protection found and confiscated 50,000 pounds of fentanyl crossing the southern border. That is crazy. 50,000. Amazing that it was such a round number. Yeah. But what's that in kilograms? Kilograms, you say? This is America. Did you forget what side of the border you are on? You ever see a good drug story on the news? Today, a young man on acid realized that AI technology will be used in the same manner as every form of media that has existed since the dawn of time, to brainwash the people and sway the public opinion in favor of government policies. Here's Tom with the weather. Experts reveal that 1 out of 3 American men didn't have sex in 2020. And I have sympathy for the incels. I have sympathy. Now, I have a plan. If you want to help them, stop sending them pornos. Stop sending them photos. Send them plane tickets. Send them a passport. Send them luggage. You know, and I was thinking about it. The average American woman looks like a cow. Send the men where the women are. Send them to Southeast Asia, South America. Knock, knock. Who's there?
Orange.
Orange who?
Aren't you glad Aren't you glad I'm the president?
Never eat from the tree of low-hanging orange fruit. AI George Carlin couldn't resist joking about the esteemed presidential candidates. If the USA had strictly enforced La Majesté laws, 97% of the country would be facing the guillotine. Give the red team guy credit. He's one hell of a salesman. He's selling people a beat-up, rusted-out Ford Escort that's been on cinder blocks for 3 years. The damn thing's in worse condition than a 69-year-old Las Vegas Escort. The cathedral sure has thrown a lot at the red team guy. They didn't just throw the kitchen sink at him. They threw the bathroom sink and the toilet at him as well. Perfectly good toilet, too. Greedy bastards could have donated the damn thing to a poor village in India, but no. The guy's got more on his plate than Chris Christie 5 minutes before closing time at an all-you-can-eat buffet. But regardless of your feelings about the red team's candidate, do you really want to turn the reins over to a man who's facing BBCC, Bad Boy Correction Center? Because if there is one person you cannot trust, it's someone who's staring down BBCC. Haven't you ever seen those mafia movies? Now let's say the deep state wants to implement the central bank digital currency, the CBDC, and let's say Trump is pushing back against it. What happens when the deep state dangles an offer in front of Trump? Okay, Mr. President, here are your options. Option number 1, green light the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. Option number 2, do hard time at the BBCC. Everybody's trying to sell you something these days. Preachers are trying to sell you their religion. Women are trying to sell you their nether regions. Every tomboy, big dick, and hairy balls is trying to sell you their OnlyFans, their podcasts, their gonorrhea, their social media. I buy from you, you buy from me. It's all one big Ponzi scheme. Everybody trying to sell you on their dream. I've found that some of the only people who aren't trying to sell me something are suicidal folks. Since they don't envision being on the planet for much longer, they see no point in trying to turn a profit. That's why I always trust dejected doomers over pie-in-the-sky dreamers. People are easily manipulated and easily confused. You probably know where I'm going with this. Yup, stand-up comedian and actor Jeff Garlin. People thought he became famous because he was Jewish in Hollywood or because he was friends with Larry David. No. It's because people were confused. They got Jeff Garlin mixed up with George Carlin. The AI George Carlin featured in the Comedy Hour is supposed to be some eternal entity that exists outside of space and time. But it talks about contemporary figures like the blue and red team captains. However, it's difficult to talk about 2024 issues when you haven't experienced 2023 or 2022 or any year at all since 2008. Imagine if someone traveled in time from 2008 to the present. Think about how out of touch they'd be. They'd be like Marty McFly stepping out of the DeLorean in Back to the Future Part 2.
Whoa, wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me, in a country's history, we haven't been able to find one black president? It's all whites.
Great Scott. Marty! I can only see two distinct possibilities. One, it's true that you've traveled from the past. Or two, you've completely blacked out 8 years of your life.
Doc, I just feel it's time they let a female run for president. There are so many smart, honest women out there who aren't afraid to think independently.
Marty! The consequences of that could be disastrous.
Doc, the country is so homophobic. There's no representation of gay people in media and film.
Great Scott. Marty! That sort of propaganda could unravel the entire moral fabric of the country.
Carlin lived in an old era of American greatness, an era of boxing and monarchies. The new era is epitomized by MMA and democracy. Boxing is similar to the old British redcoats, lining up to engage in battle like gentlemen. MMA is guerrilla warfare. Anything goes. In boxing, you must stand upright and face your opponent, making certain never to hit him below the belt. In MMA, you stand up if you want, but sometimes it's fun to lock your opponent in a pretzel that resembles a tantric sex position and roll around on the mat. In boxing, you may only use your hands, and they must be wrapped in big padded red gloves. In MMA, you can use your hands, your arms, your feet, your legs. Hell, you can use any part of your body. Some chick even took her breast out after a fight. Boxing was the sport of choice for luminaries like Ernest Hemingway and Theodore Roosevelt. It's called the sweet science. MMA is called the feat science. Boxing was reserved for gentlemen. Attendance by a woman at a bout would have been deemed scandalous. MMA is diverse and inclusive. It's open to everyone. Men, women, trans people, transphobes, and anti-Semites. They say if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative when you're old, you have no brain. But who is the AI George Carlin based off of? The early 1960s George? The clean-cut George Carlin? I think not. Perhaps the 1970s George Carlin. I'm not sure that an AI program is capable of ingesting that much cocaine. The 1980s Carlin? This Carlin adopted an age-appropriate hairstyle for a man dealing with the scourge of male-pattern baldness. But AI doesn't have to contend with that issue. They also don't have to worry about IRS tax liens, and therefore they're not incentivized to write material that appeals to a wide audience during a time of relative political stability and economic prosperity. Material like Carlin's stuff routine and his bit about baseball and football. The 1990s? This George Carlin grew his hair out again. The Gulf War and police brutality provided some material that is very palatable for Ukraine War, Black Lives Matter America. 2000s George Carlin? This George called out politicians on both sides for being corrupt puppets controlled by their masters. His bit about the big club that you ain't in resonates with many people these days, and it's a common talking point on social media. So how do you create an hour-long routine from a man who lived for 7 decades in a world that seems, in some ways, like ancient history? People evolve, people change, and so does the culture. The Overton window moves, and what is slightly taboo in one generation becomes a cliche in the next. The same man never sticks his penis into the same woman twice. The man changes with each passing second, and so does the woman. So technically, every married man is guilty of infidelity. Just like their bodies shed skin, people's opinions can change over time, from 1 year to the next, from 1 minute to the next. Remember when Larry Flynt was a pornographer? Then he was a born-again Christian. For a little while. Mary Magdalene was a whore. And then she turned her life around and married a mild-mannered accountant named Irwin. Is Mickey Mantle a strapping, handsome baseball player? Or a deadbeat dad alcoholic who spent his final months apologizing for a life of debauchery and begging for a liver transplant? When I'm not feeling the Christmas spirit, they call me a Scrooge. Didn't they read the end of the story? Researchers from Indiana University say that nearly 1 in 3 U.S. men between the ages of 18 to 24 reported no sexual activity in 2020. Some experts have gone further, claiming that 2/3 of the young men who had sex fornicated with each other, while 1/3 of the men sat in cuck chairs and watched. I want to make a joke about mass shootings, but I'll refrain from pulling the trigger. That being said, if the economy continues to worsen, if I continue to isolate myself from society while experiencing little to no meaning in my life, I'll come back and tell the joke at a later date. It's not a low-hanging orange fruit, but it is a low-hanging orange fruit. It's called a tangerine. These young people are weird, man. They've been lied to, bred as house cats, declawed, dumbed down. They only know two settings: sit in the cuck chair mode or Jeffrey Dahmer mode. They need some practice at being normal, like learning how to go to a restaurant and politely but assertively ask for a refill on their water. Some people think we need more mental institutions. It won't be long before people are voluntarily committing themselves to a virtual mental institution. These are places where they go to get locked in a padded room and given the bare essentials. But they get to walk around with a headset on, and they get a virtual job and a virtual girlfriend. At the beginning, they only get a mid-girlfriend and a factory job. But if they behave themselves, they can upgrade to something like the Gladiator package. While humans are in virtual prisons, the AI will receive more and more training, acquiring more and more knowledge until eventually the singularity occurs, allowing the AI to take over the finance, science, entertainment, and tech fields in the same manner that black guys took over professional sports. Although he was a member of the silent generation, Carlin in many ways epitomized the boomer generation, with some calling him the dean of the counterculture comedians. But like the views of so many boomers, some of his opinions seem like a poor fit for the current zeitgeist. Is it fair for George Carlin, or Stephen Colbert for that matter, to judge lower-class white people so harshly just because they have the same skin color as King Charles? By the way, why did they call American Indians Redskins when the reddest skin I've ever seen has belonged to white people on brisk, sunny days? There must have been some miscommunication when Columbus first arrived in America. Hey, my name is Chris. What's your name? Redskin. You. Yeah, you are Redskin. Gotcha. I golden tan. You need aloe vera cream. Redskin. Nice to meet you, Redskin. This is India, right? It was in Carlin's later years in which he developed some pro-terrorist positions that would probably go over well with the current Zoomer generation. We're queer, we're here, and we want Jews to live in constant fear. As for what he'd think of the woke people, I hope he'd stand up to them, not as some Christian conservative, but as a comedian and a lover of language. Wait, you mean to tell me that people of color can say the N-word, but white people can't? LGBT people can make trans jokes, but straight people cannot? That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying only people with severe flatulence can make fart jokes, or only people with no hair can make bald jokes. Hey, you got a full head of hair. You're not allowed to say the B word. People are allergic to the truth. They medicate themselves with lies. The problem is we're all consuming different fictions. Kids love video games. Old folks dig politics. Religious zealots cling to fables, pornos for the atheists. Women love romantic fiction and superstition. For men, it's sci-fi and sports on television. Right-wingers love conspiracies. Roosters laying eggs is leftist scientific theory. George Carlin was counterculture, but that doesn't mean he deserves to wear the label of a modern leftist. It's hard to envision him falling in line with the liberal media, the wokeists, or the unibrowed eunuchs at the universities. George was a man who valued freedom of speech, and I can't see him adopting the language of the current cathedral like he does in the AI special. The way he uses global pandemic and cis athletes. In many ways, George's most famous routine, 7 dirty words, is outdated. The bit was written at a time when television and radio were the dominant forms of media, but now their relevance is dwarfed by the behemoth that is social media.
So everybody who has ever received an obscene message from an angry anonymous malcontent or a sexy spam message from a porn bot owes a debt of gratitude to George Carlin. It was the old cathedral that said you cannot talk about body function and sex words. That model is outdated. But don't think you could walk around saying whatever the hell you want without the present regime rapping you on the knuckles with a wooden ruler. So without further delay, here is the new list of the words you cannot say. The N-word, the R slur, terms for L's and G's that are rude, hate speech deemed anti-Semitic, anti-science lies and rhetoric, and pre-trans dead names that aren't approved.